Hello everyone, Floppy Waffles 69 here, and welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are going to be starting a brand new Down the Line series, and like we always do, we go cruiser, destroyer, battleship, I believe, or maybe it's cruiser, battleship, destroyer. I'm not really 100% sure, but regardless, we are looking at the Burrows line. This is the latest destroyer line added to the game, so this is the alternative to the USS Gearing line that has been in the game for ages. And it's quite good. It's quite fun. Obviously, this ship line was covered extensively probably around 4 to 6 months ago when the ship line came out. Maybe it was 3 months ago. I'm not 100% sure. Somewhere around those ranges of time. But I didn't want to cover it back then. Obviously, everyone else was covering it. So now that all that has died down, I would like to now take a look at it myself and see what all the hubbub is about this ship. Because actually, if you look at the matchmaker, you don't really see too many of these ships nowadays. I really don't. I still see the Shimikazes, the Gdansks, the Gearings, the Darings, all those kind of ships, but I ever rarely see the Burrows, and I wonder why that is. So as we always do, we're going to be going down this entire line. We're going to be talking about each and every ship past Tier 5, but hey, this line starts at Tier 7, so we are going right up to Tier 7 and talking about the USS Hughes. The USS Hughes is quite an interesting ship. As you can tell from the model here on screen, it looks pretty similar to another ship we have in game. And that's right, it's basically the USS Sims, and they have turned it into the USS Hughes here, I guess a sister ship, so to speak of, right? This ship did indeed exist, which is pretty cool. So we always love having historically accurate, in quotation mark, ships, or just, ships that are historically based, shown in game. We always do love that, especially for me. I love that as well. But how is the USS Hughes and this entire line? Well, this entire line creates two main points of interest, or the two gimmicks of this line is this line has or features semi-armor piercing shells similar to that on the Forrest Sherman that we all know and love and fear. And also it has that new smoke mechanic. This is the one where you press T key. It must run a minimum of like 20 seconds. That's what it is, at least on this ship. And before you can go ahead and turn it off. And you have a timer of 2 minutes and 20 seconds on this ship. Once you have utilized all 2 minutes and 20 seconds of your smoke screen on this vessel, you are out of smoke. Rather than having 3 charges base to 4 with Superintendent, you are now limited by time, not by charges. Very flexible, very fun to use, very strong to use. That is one thing I want to point out right in the beginning of this video. The smoke screen that is featured on these ships are incredibly strong, especially for gunboat focused or gun focused DDs. It really allows me to, whenever I feel threatened, or at least I have a good firing angle, or enemy ship is spotted by someone else on my team, I can smoke up. Basically, I don't want to say fully immune, but we're going to go with immune enough, not be visible on screen, and I can out-trade that enemy destroyer, hopefully taking 0 to hardly any damage in return. Incredibly strong. So what is the balancing features of these ships? Well, I'll tell you right out the gates, what I think balances these ships are as follows, okay? One, besides the Hughes, okay? I don't really want to create too much because this is basically the Sims. It is a sleeker, nicer looking DD. But the Osborne, the Christopher, and the Burrows are very large DDs. Not hard to hit. And they can definitely take a lot of damage and punishment just because of their size, okay? That is the first thing. Not hard to hit at all. Okay, and their concealment values are usually supposed to be higher, though we'll get into more of that depending on each specific ship down the line. And lastly, their maneuverability and turret traverse, I'll just kind of group those into two, are usually on the slower side. And you're going to notice that here, especially on the Hughes with the turret traverse. I think that's one thing they really try to do, is because SAP and this kind of smoke gimmick is incredibly strong here at Tier 7. They really tried making the ship tougher to play by not having your turrets. If you don't have them pre-aimed on a certain section of the vessel, or sorry, certain section of the screen where an enemy vessel could potentially be coming. It could be kind of a bit of a nuisance to bring your ship's guns to bear. But like I always do on this channel, like I do with the premium analysis or just the analysis ships in general, we're going to do a full deep dive of her, talk a little about her like I already have been doing, and then we're going to go ahead and show some gameplay about what this ship is capable of doing, talking and highlighting about some pros and some cons, and giving some tips and tricks, and then of course giving you guys my final thoughts. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the armor scheme of a Tier 7 DD is incredibly standard and stock. There is no improved armor plating on this ship whatsoever. As you can see, you are coated in 16 millimeters of armor. Not hard to penetrate, right? HE, it's going to penetrate you, especially from destroyer levels. Armor piercing is most likely going to be overpenning you unless it's short fused. The whole 9 yards, right? Survivability, you're clocking in at 13,800. Your artillery, this is where we start talking about, this is like the bread and butter of these ships, okay? If you like guns and damage and farming, that's what these ships do incredibly well. They are glorified damage farmers for destroyers. I do consider them to be more like a second layer support DD, kind of similar to like the Khabarovsk, the Gdansk, those sort of things. These ships are strong by themselves, but get even stronger when there's an allied destroyer being able to spot for you. That's really where these ships shine. Very good support destroyers, that's for sure. But again, the smoke screen, talking about the support DDs, only in the essence of their guns. They really don't have much team utility when it comes to their smoke screens, because unless they're sitting right next to the ship that they're trying to smoke and they're staying stationary or within both moving a quarter speed, these are not very team friendly smokes at all. Matter of fact, I would go ahead and say the opposite. These are very selfish minded smoke screens, just like you have on the Daring line that we've already covered on this channel. They're your short burst, quick to use, quick to reuse, and a lot of them very similar to that style of smoke screen. Okay. The reload of these 4x1 127 millimeter guns is going to be 3.7 seconds. And then you look at your 180-degree turn time of these turrets, and it is 16.4 seconds, which is a bit of an ouch. Again, just make sure you have your turrets pre-aimed or put on the right section of your ship where you think the threat is going to be coming from. Okay. Again, your maximum range is actually quite nice at 12.3 kilometers. Again, looking at your high explosive and semi-armor piercing, that's what this ship features as its 2 ammunition types. No armor piercing, by the way, which is quite interesting. Your HE is going to go 1,800 damage with a 5% fire chance, and going ahead and penning 21 millimeters of effective armor with an initial shell velocity of 792. These are very lofty shells, so you're going to have to aim accordingly or get closer to the target to more reliably land shells on target. That's why I don't really recommend taking, it's not advanced firing training anymore, but like the skill, the tier 4 skill that extends your range. To me, especially down here at tier 7, there's really no point. I think 12.3 is enough by all means. And if you exceed that range, it's going to be kind of a struggle bus to really reliably land shells on target, unless the enemy is either stationary or moving in a straight line at the same speed. Okay. Moving into the semi-armor piercing, and this is the big strength of the ship, is the semi-armor piercing. Again, you have to be familiar with how semi-armor piercing works. Okay, semi-armor piercing works in 2 ways. One, when it hits, 2 things are calculated. If it has enough penetration on the part that it's landing on, it either penetrates. If it doesn't have the amount of penetration, it shatters. There are no ricochet chances at all when it comes to semi-armor piercing. It's either one or another. Again, with semi-armor piercing, there is no chance to set fires. So this is a direct damage dealer, much like armor piercing. But again, because you're only penetrating 36 millimeters of effective armor with the Hughes, you have to find a ship that you can not only overmatch with that 36 millimeters of semi-armor piercing, that you can actually score Citadel weapons with it. I believe I have done it. Was it a Kotovsky or a Mikoyan? One of those 2 ships. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I actually was able to Citadel it, which was quite humorous in my opinion, or at my expense, or at his expense, let's be honest. Again, that initial velocity is tying your high explosive at 792 meters a second. Going into the torpedoes, you have the 2x4 533 millimeter launchers. These are mounted in the middle of the ship and can swivel both sides of your ship, starboard and to port. They have a 6-second 180-degree turn time with a torpedo reload of 95 seconds. Again, maximum range is 9.2. This is going to match the likes of the Mahan and the Benson, very equivalent to the Benson torpedoes as they are relatively stealthy at 1.1 kilometers, and you have a 55 knot top speed with a maximum damage of 11,600. Again, these torpedoes are going to give the enemy that they're launched at about 7.4 seconds of a reaction time. I find these torpedoes actually pretty good. 55 knots nowadays feels pretty damn anemic and slow. Again, as you're going to see in my commander build later on in the video when I start the battle, I actually don't take any torpedo skills because why would I? The guns and the semi-armor piercing are just so damn good. I really want to maximize the amount of damage and how quick I'm doing that damage to enemies rather than speccing into arguably the worst armament type in the game, sadly. Torpedo boats definitely are in not the best of state lately in the game. They still definitely have the potential, but I'm just saying in regards, I would take probably a gunboat DD over the likes of a torpedo boat focused DD any day of the week. Okay. AA defense. I'll briefly touch on it, guys. I really wouldn't count too much on your AA. I mean, you have damage by short range 67, which is a 2-kilometer range, and then your long range AA, which I believe is dual purpose. Right? It's 100% chance or probability of hitting, and it's 5.8 with only 70. Again, this AA is not very good, guys. So please don't rely too much on it. And it is dual purpose 127 millimeter guns, which I think a lot of American DDs, or if not all, have. Maneuverability, 35 knots, not terrible. Turning circle radius at 500 meters with a rudder shift time of 2.7. This is the build I'm currently using. It works. It handles well. This ship does handle well. This ship is kind of a little bit of an anomaly in regards to the rest of the line. I know I said one of the balance features is the handling of the ship, and we'll get into that. I think the Hughes of all these DDs handles pretty well for its size. So again, disregard that statement when I'm talking about the Hughes, but I'm just talking in the line in general, especially when we get into the tier 9 and tier 10, which is the Christopher and the Burrows. You'll definitely see what I'm talking about when we feature those ships later on. And then base concealment on this ship is 7.1. I believe if you take the commander skill, which I highly recommend, it will take you down to 6.4 kilometers, which again is pretty good. Sims is crying in a corner at 6.6. I really wish the Sims would be buffed to 6.4 like the Hughes, but hey, that was featured in my other video I did about 4 or 5 months ago. That ship definitely needs some love, at least in my opinion. Still a good ship, but definitely needs some love. Has been overshadowed by ships like this. Okay, the difference between older DDs in the game, 8-year DD, maybe 9-year DD, compared to, 2025 DDs, right? 10 years have passed, and some ships definitely need some love, that's for sure. But yeah, guys, that is the Hughes in a nutshell. I don't want to touch too much on the upgrades now or the commander skills as of now. We're going to feature those more in game. So without further ado, guys, let's go on and check her out in battle, shall we? Okay, and here we are in battle with the Tier 7 American Alternative DD, the USS Hughes. So first things first, I do want to state that of all these DDs in this line, the Hughes is by far my least favorite. That being said, I still find her a very, very strong ship, especially at Tier 7 where she is. And why is that? Well, I think she has just a good package overall with her individual utility that she brings as a destroyer. Again, this utility she brings compared to like team utility that I would say like the Mahan brings, for an example, is polar opposites. Okay, this is more equivalent to DDs such as like the Royal Navy because of their short burst smoke screens and their personal hydro. The same kind of rules apply for this ship. It gets a plus 10% speed boost on these ships. Okay, I forgot to mention that in the port analysis, but then this speed boost will apply plus 10%. Okay, that's why usually if you have the coal, I highly recommend taking and picking that engine boost modification, which is going to increase your duration of like, what is it, 30%, I believe? It's crazy. These ships are incredibly strong with the speed boost active. Okay, and number 2, this smoke screen that it has, the on-off switch for 2 minutes and 20 seconds is pretty damn nice. Especially, there are a lot of DDs that wish they had that I guess, power with their smoke screens. Because sometimes we've all been there when we accidentally hit our smoke screen or we hit in a situation where it turns out we really didn't need it, and then that's a waste of a charge, usually, right? This ship really doesn't have that issue. All it has to wait is a minimum of 20 seconds before it can turn it back off again, which is nice. Just remember to not leave it on. Okay, there's a lot of players that I've seen, which is a big mistake that a lot of players do, is they just leave it on because I think they simply just do not know either A, that they can turn it off, or B, how to manage their smoke screens. Okay, the number one thing that leads to these ships' survivability is the management of their smoke screens. So please do not just leave it on, sailing aimlessly like this. There's a time and a place for everything, and it's definitely not within the first 2 minutes of the game to expend all 2 minutes and 20 seconds of your smoke. So use that with caution. And again, the last thing would be the semi-armor piercing. Any DD that sees this ship or runs into her is going to feel pain, that is for sure. And I would immediately try to disengage because this ship is just going to flat out do damage to you and usually out-trade you. Okay? Now, granted, even when the ship gets up tiered in tier 8 and tier 9, it still is capable and it still will do damage. But again, you're looking at higher DPM, more guns, more accuracy, that kind of stuff. So it's still not up tiering the best. I've always said in this game that I think ships that up tier the best in this game are probably battleships, and then if not, depending on a certain tier, I think destroyers probably take the cake, just because they can utilize their concealment. Of course, with submarines, CVs, and radar and that kind of stuff, obviously that gets nullified a bit. But again, it seems to just be a little bit easier because you could play with stealth a little bit more. Okay. Another thing that this ship does bring compared to like her sisters at tier 8, tier 9, and tier 10, and she actually has 2 torpedo launchers, which is incredibly nice on this ship. I find myself landing more torpedoes with the Hughes. Duh, right? You have 8 instead of just 4 or 5, depending on which ship you're at. But yeah, starting at tier 8 for the Osborne, going all the way up to the Burrows, you only have 1 launcher, which kind of handicaps you a bit. But again, tries to emphasize to you, or Wargaming is trying to tell you, like, you're not a torpedo boat. Is there times to play from stealth and launch your torps? Absolutely. That applies to every ship, including other gunships like the Small and the Gdansk, right? No one's calling those torpedo armaments weak by any means. But again, you should really be crystal clear when you're dealing with like the Burrows, the Osborne, and the Christopher, which is 8, 9, and 10. You only have 1 launcher, so you really can't rely on that, right? You really can't rely on that Alpha Strike. It's just going to be used to maybe min-max floodings and whatnot. That's really when you want to do it, okay? Okay, going into more about the ship's, like basically utility and ammunition type, I would say 90% of the time you're probably sticking with semi-armor piercing. It's just going to be your strong main damage dealer, and you're going to be your most consistent damage dealer. I'd say cruisers better be wary, destroyers especially. Battleships, it depends, right? With your armor, it's really good if they know where they're shooting and where shells are landing. But mainly, I've seen burrows melt enemy cruisers, and you're going to see examples of this here. Eventually, when I get engaged with the McCoyan, he only has 6 guns. Yeah, I have 4, but semi-armor piercing, and I'm in a destroyer. I don't have a citadel. He has a citadel. Again, this is a very big strength for a lot of these gunboats you see in game now, is they really just dummy enemy cruisers, which I've always kind of found baffling. I mean, again, I understand it, I get it, but again, maybe that's just the cruiser main inside of me talking. It does suck when a DD is just completely out gunboating your cruiser. It fucking bites ass. I've been there, right? We've all been fighting Club Airs and Marceaus at like 13, 14 kilometers, and they are just making you pay, and you're sitting there in your Des Moines or Worcester, and you just can't land a single fucking shell. We've all been there, right? And these ships can do that as well. Again, I'm maybe not as skilled as some other destroyer players, but hey, like, if you're a destroyer main, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and you just feast upon inexperienced cruiser players or cruiser players that just really don't understand their shell velocity with their guns, right? Especially the American cruisers. Those ships really do feel the brunt of these gunboat assault, right? Or the pain, at least. Okay. But then again, the other 10% of the time, I find myself shooting HE. Now, you're going to see examples of that in-game as well. And maybe one question you ask yourself was, well, why would I want to shoot HE in this thing when semi-armor piercing is just a more consistent damage dealer? And, I find 2 scenarios where I really would shoot HE, okay? One, if I'm trying to catch a target on fire and do damage over time, okay? This one is like big to ships that I knew that just got hit by a torpedo of mine, and I want to see if I can set a fire. Again, 5% chance, plus signal flags get you up to 6. If you so choose to take Demolition Expert, I really don't. You can get up to 6 and 7. Again, that's one reason you want to shoot HE. Another reason is if a destroyer is almost dead and it's really giving you no angle for you to penetrate, or you can't reliably, there's some citadels by the way, can't reliably hit their ship in a good section where it's not going to result in a shatter, I switch to HE. If it's like 2,000 or 3,000 left damage left on the ship, I will shoot HE. And I guess the third reason, I know I said two, the third reason is if there's a battleship bow into me and I find myself in front of him, or I just can't get a good angle on his side profile, then I'll switch to HE and just rely on HE damage and hopefully setting floods and, or sorry, setting fires on his ship. So min-maxing floods and fires, trying to finish off low target, low HP ships, or bow in battleships, or even then if you want to take it a step higher, even there's some cruiser players or some cruisers that are like heavily armored, nose in, looking at you, Petro, maybe the Moskva, Stalingrad, those sort of things. Napoli, maybe you need to rely on fires instead of just your raw sap damage. But basically, the vast majority of the time, you want to be shooting semi-armor piercing. It's just going to translate to more damage dealt, and usually you're going to trade or out-trade enemy ships more reliably and consistently, right? That's what you want to do. Again, another thing, and this is just kind of in general with all semi-armor piercing, I find a lot of people don't know where to aim on ships. And it all boils down to one, or I guess two big things. One, knowing how much your semi-armor piercing can penetrate. Mine is 36. So if I know I can penetrate 36 millimeters of armor like citadels on super light cruisers or decks, something like that, I know I can try to aim around those areas of the ship and potentially get massive damage. Other than that, I would say you want to shoot upper belt. To almost where superstructure. Superstructure upper belt is where you want to land on flat surface targets. You don't want to be aiming waterline with these shells because that's going to result in just shatters. On their main armor belt, there is no way in hell you're going to be able to penetrate those belts of armor, right? There's going to be, especially on battleships, are like 200, 300 millimeters. There's no way. Try to aim superstructure. Even some cruisers, try to aim upper belt. I would stay away unless you're fighting an enemy destroyer that does not have improved armor. Even with some DDs that have improved armor, 36 millimeters should be more than enough. You want to aim upper belt or superstructure is where you want to land, and that's where you're going to get your damaging salvos, right? You do not want to land waterline. You just result in shatters and basically no damage, and you would better off be shooting HE because then you could also get fire. Okay, here's a prime example of why the smoke screen is just so flexible. It allows me to immediately smoke up again, and I'm sailing out of my smoke. Well, I don't care. I'll just slow down, go back in my smoke, and then once I'm disengaged completely and I know that Omaha is no longer in my range, I will get out of my smoke screen and I will fuck right off. Now, one thing I want to keep in mind, your smoke dispersion, so how often it creates a puff, you need to be careful because especially if you have your speed boost procced and you are reversing in your smoke screen. I have noticed that you will blow right out of your smoke screen before your smoke has generated, and you will be detected for a brief time, allowing the enemy to see you, lock onto you, and shoot you, especially if they're already pre-aimed at your smoke screen. Please be careful when you're doing that. I would highly suggest if you start the reverse for 3 seconds, then go stop or forward to justify like staying within place a little bit more. Because if you don't, I'm telling you, it has been, I have died a couple times, especially when I'm looking at Venezias and other ships that can schwack me with high explosive and whatnot. I've taken massive chunks of damage because I refuse or I've just forgotten to have done that, my own rule. So it's one kind of rule that I've fabricated. Again, I don't want to like TM it. I'm sure people have found out it by themselves, but I do want to, highlight it a little bit to you guys to realize that this is a little bit of an issue and a concern. So just keep that in mind when you are smoking up and have that speed boost up and running, right? These ships obviously are good at open water gunboating as well. The Hughes' firing angles on her main guns, as you can see here, her torpedo angles, not terrible at all, pretty standard, I would say. Her guns feel pretty comfortable too. Like you wouldn't have to show any more profile or side profile that you wouldn't normally have to show compared to like other gunboats for the tier for tier, right? Once you get to the Christopher and the Burrows, excluding the Osborne, you will find that your third turret, your rear turret there, it has horrendous firing angles, and you will have to expose a metric fuck ton of side. And especially if you are in the pre-kited position in those ships, in order to get your front two turrets, you're going to have to swivel a lot, and it's kind of painful. Again, not really concerned down here at tier 7. This is a little bit more flexible, but again, once you get those 137s, those big bulky turrets and their placement on those ships, it is going to be a bit of a struggle bus for you, so you're going to have to keep that in mind and make sure you factor that into when you're shooting and maneuvering your vessel, right? Obviously here we are in game with a 73,000 damage so far on a tier 7 destroyer. That's pretty good. And I've only landed 2 torpedoes. I'd say most DDs tier for tier, especially at this like lower tiers, are racking up the vast majority of their damage with their torps. And I haven't had that issue. I'd say just because semi-armor piercing and the guns are just, they feel pretty comfortable on this ship. I'm able to rack up a decent amount of damage with her consistently, which is a key word I know a lot of players like to hear. Consistently, and it's true. These ships are very consistent at dealing damage because that's their sole purpose in this game. They are consistent damage dealers and farmers. That's why you want to play this ship, okay? I really wouldn't consider these DDs anti-destroyers. Like you have like the Gdansk, the Small, and ships like that really try to go after enemy destroyers. I think they love to shoot DDs and by all means can absolutely punish them. But I don't think that they go out of their way in order to engage enemy destroyers to kill them solely. I think if anything, these things just farm ships no matter who it is. If an enemy destroyer is spotted, he's food. If an enemy cruiser is spotted, he's food. If a battleship's spotted and at the right angle, he's food. Like any ship that's spotted, that's what the ship is going to be able to do, which is farm. I mean, yes, if we want to get more specific, the Small and the Gdansk, they can all do the same thing. But I think because of their radar, like the Black, for example, is another great example. Because of their radar, it really influences your ability to counter smoking ships, and that's going to be mainly your enemy destroyers, right? We all consider those ships to be highly lethal when it comes to dealing with enemy destroyers that are those kind of ships. So again, I wouldn't really concern myself with being this an anti-destroyer DD, but the ship can by all means do that amount of damage to enemy destroyers if the situation presents itself. Enemy destroyers, or if you're in a DD and you're fighting against these things, you really have to be careful in knowing where these ships are, because these ships, unlike the Akazuki, which again, the Haragumo, Kitakaze, Akazuki line, that line is very strong and can deal out a lot of damage. These ships can do even more damage because of the semi-armor piercing rule, which they're going to be getting full pens usually, which is going to translate to higher damage per minute and higher alpha strike on their shells. So you're going to have to use caution with that. Okay. Some other things about the ship worth talking about. I guess I can pretty much move into my final thoughts with the ship. The Hughes is a nice ship. It's a really strong ship. I don't think there's anybody out there would say the ship is weak. I really don't find myself playing a whole lot of tier 7 DDs, if I'm being completely honest with you. But when I do, I don't see why I wouldn't play the Hughes more. The Hughes brings a lot to the table. It basically allows you to just shoot enemy ships, even if you are finding yourself in up-tiered games. You can just do damage, where a lot of ships are really held back by their HE and their small caliber and their tier. One big disadvantage that tier 7 DDs have, especially when they get up-tiered, is they don't have access to the 5th slot, which is basically mainly going to be taking the concealment module on your upgrade slot, which is going to allow you to plus 10% concealment bonus on your ship. That's a big disadvantage, and a lot of tier 7 ships struggle when they go up to tier 8s or against tier 8s because of that reason. And the detection that the ship has at 6.4 kilometers really isn't that bad. It is higher for a destroyer, but then again, like another ship that has 6.4 kilometers detection is the Akazuki or Akatsuki or whatever it's called at tier 7, the Japanese mainline destroyer. I mean, talk about a ship that might want to get a little bit of a concealment buff throughout the times because of how it's trying to be played in nowadays. Well, the Hughes can just match spot it, and good luck turning out and being able to keep your guns on target while the Hughes already chunked you for half HP before you can even complete your turn. It's just one of those things that I think they need to continuously go back to older ships, and if they're going to release ships like this, they need to go back and hopefully buff those ships to make sure that they're still playing the way they're intended to be playing. And I think the Japanese DD line, not to get too far sidetracked here, is one of those lines that could probably use some love up and down the tech tree, if we're being honest, okay? It's not like anyone's going around and saying those ships are strong by any means. I think they're more fun And I think you get an adrenaline rush when you're Shimakaze and you get a dev strike here and there. But I really don't think that I'm going to sit here and say they're strong. Matter of fact, if you want my honest opinion as a cruiser player and someone who plays battleships time to time, I think if I have an allied Shimakaze player, I'm usually skeptical because I think like on my team on my flank. Sorry to speaking so fast there. I'm usually skeptical because I'm like, they're probably going to go and die, or they're not going to do jack shit and they're going to try to sneak into the enemy spawn and do nothing all game. So it's one of those things like, I don't want to get too far sidetracked. I'm going to stop talking about it, but it's one of those things that I do kind of factor in. So we've been able to keep about 50 seconds left on our smoke screen here towards the end of the game. So again, we're going to use basically all of it here trying to farm out the hood to do as much damage before he inevitably kills our Pensacola. Obviously, the hood's AP is known through being like short of fused to deal with those cruisers and overpen battleships. But again, he doesn't even pick up the kill. It's his Fiji that ends up grabbing it for him. Again, with his push, though, I'm sure that inevitably led to the demise of the Pensacola. And I don't know why the Pensacola turned back, but whatever. Obviously, here's a good example of what I'm talking about with switching to the high explosive. I switched to the HE here in order to finish off this low targeted, what is that, a Sims? Feels bad for that guy. Finish him off a little bit here before I went ahead and go back to the hood. Again, I shot a couple HE salvos at the hood because he was nose into me, but once he softens his angle to bear his guns around, I switched to 70 armor piercing almost immediately, and I'm going to start chunking the HMS Hood's broadside. Again, because you only have single mounted gun turrets, I do find the dispersion to be a little bit more wonky compared to like double barrel turrets. So your dispersion on the Hughes can be a bit funky from time to time. But yeah, you get salvos anywhere between like 400s, 500s as like your minimums to like 2000 as your maximums. This is where I'm kind of finding like myself. I think the highest damaging salve I got is around 3000. You kind of buffer around that range just with your DPM. You're only 4 shells going down range, and it's 127 millimeter guns because these are the only 127 millimeter guns at in this line. Basically, right after this, when you go to the Osborne, you immediately pick up these 137 millimeter guns that carry all the way up to the Burrows, which are pretty damn strong. It's going to be interesting to play those things for you guys and give you my opinion on that ship as we progress here a little bit. But again, this game's going right down to the wire, guys. This has been a really, really fun game thus far. Hopefully, if you are tuning me out, you're enjoying pretty damn strong game. If I wasn't trying to do a ship analysis video on the Hughes, I probably would have featured this as a battle report video just because it's just really highlighting the strength of the ship, and hopefully this sells itself for you. If you master how to play these ships are going to be a lot of fun for you and not a lot of fun to play against, just because of their immense amount of strengths that they can bring. Okay, obviously it is a 4v4 here, so I'm hoping that my fire, as you can see, we are tied, which is crazy. My fire hopefully will burn out the HMS Hood, which will give us a advantage because I don't know what's going to happen over here to the right side with my allies. You can never trust your allies in this game, that is for sure. But our fire ends up taking out the Hood, which is huge. That basically all we have to do here is just survive and no one die. We actually end up nuking the enemy Omaha here and get him out of the game as well, basically asserting us or handing us the win. And we also follow up with an enemy destroyer kill, though he does in return kill our New Orleans, but it doesn't matter at this point. We have definitely won the game. What a game. Super fun game. Again, just really highlighting the strengths of this ship and what it brings. And again, if this is where we're starting, if this is base, I mean, sky's the limit with this ship when we go up to the Burrows, right? And the amount of power that this ship is going to bring. Again, it's not all sunshines and rainbows, though. There are going to be a lot of cons with these ships, and you're going to see that. I know that the initial thought process for a lot of people was when these ships were getting released, oh, these ships are overpowered, they're broken, blah, blah, and so and so. They are strong, but I'm telling you, they have a balance feature. Okay, they will be balanced, or they have been balanced by certain things, and I'll make sure to highlight that as we progress later on and down the tech tree, guys. But anyways, guys, that is the video. I hope you enjoyed a full deep dive analysis of the USS Hughes. Stay tuned for more, as I will be gradually releasing videos as I can. Stay safe out there, everyone. Much love, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace out, guys.